Hey everyone, this is Kendra Valentine again. So, I am behind the eight ball in recording my podcast. So, I'm going to be focusing on that for, I don't know, the next few days or what have you. But ooh, my the foundation that I'm recording on is like rocky. So, I have to stop moving or we're going to keep moving. Anyway, um, before I get into it, I just want to give the blanket trigger warning that I'm going to give likely at the beginning of every single podcast, which is this podcast is not intended for audiences that are expecting something that is edited for lifetime television. Anyone under 18, really, this is probably not the podcast for you. Anyone who otherwise categorizes themselves an adult who acts 18, probably not the podcast for you either. We are going to be talking about things that are real and raw and true as it relates to healing, expanding comfort zones, and all the things in between. So just wanted to let you know that ahead of time. So if you need to bounce and if you're just like, yeah, it doesn't sound like my shit, um, bounce. It's all good. Please, please, please advocate for yourself and do what works well for you. The other thing I'm gonna say, I'm moving this light because it's like in my glasses and it's irritating me. The other thing I'm going to say is that I just totally lost my train of thought, but that's all right. What I'm going to say is for anyone who's seeing this podcast, as opposed to just hearing it, you can likely see me all over the place. I tend to look away when I'm thinking and etc. So that's as much as I'm going to preface all of this. I will say that it's really interesting to me how the universe works in my life, because I had, being the Capricorn that I am, I had a list of, I guess, a mapping of what I was going to be talking about, not only in this podcast, but for like the next maybe 12. And life is like, yeah, I mean, that's a cute place to start, but I don't think we're going to start there. And so, over the last couple of days, life has happened. And I'm like, you know what? And I've learned some lessons. And I thought maybe, just maybe, instead of diving all the way back, into teenagerhood, which is where I was going to start this podcast, I would go ahead and dive in the now. Um, so I think I said I'm Kendra Valentine, but I'm Kendra Valentine, aka Embodied Badass. I didn't get to this place in nice, neat little piles. I got to this place with a lot of experiential learning. I'm somebody who has to experience things to learn. So, just gonna ground down for a second. So, when lessons present themselves to me, um, it usually takes me a little bit of time to process. So, I'm going to discuss a recent, I'll call it situationship, that I found myself in. Um, and I think situationship would probably overstate it because it really was a very short, it was a slow, hard burn and then disintegration, but it was a situationship nonetheless. So, Kendra, I had somebody reach out to me, that I went to school with many, many, many years ago. And that was a few weeks ago, a month ago. I don't even know. Time is really weird in the vortex of me. But anyway, they reached out, they expressed their attraction, like as like long-standing attraction of like, I've always had a thing for you, what have you. And that certainly was like, oh, really? That's so nice, isn't it? So, started from that place. And as we got into conversations, it became pretty clear pretty quickly, for me at least, that this was not going to align with what I desire, what I'm open to, and what I'm trying to create in my life. And so I think it's relevant to mention here that very early on in the interactions back and forth, I got what so many women get, which is the infamous dick pic. And that prompted me to like cut and run, block and bounce the fuck out. And then this person, we're going to call him Bob for the sake of this podcast. My nose ring is making me crazy. I gotta adjust it. Okay, there we go. Anyway, so we're going to call him Bob. Just kind of funny as I'm thinking about it out loud because I'm thinking Bob, short for Robert, short for, anyway, doesn't matter. So I'll get a dick pic. And, immediately blocked the person. I was like, I'm not here for this shit. And I'm not. So end of that story is I'm not. But then Bob reached out to me on Facebook and was like, what happened? Where did you go? Like, why did you run away? Type thing. And I very hesitantly well, okay, so what happened was my spirit guides, I'm very connected to my spirit guides. They were like, stand down, stand down. Because I was just going to block him there and just be done and keep it moving, totally honestly. But I didn't. And my spirit guides were like, stand down, like, stand down, hear him out, stand down, hear him out. And I was like, I don't know if I like that advice, but all right, fine. I'll stand down and I'll hear him out. And from that place, I'm not going to get into like the every single conversation, every single piece of minutia. Got to a place where I was like, okay, maybe I misjudged you. Um, and then we kind of ebbed and flowed in this weird dance of like, maybe I misjudged you, but my gut was like, nah, bitch, you did not misjudge anything. But I was like, but maybe I did, and maybe I should be more this, and maybe I should be more that, in the way of accepting what was being offered. And so one conversation that we had early on that I think is relevant because to the idea that listening to our gut, I think listening to my gut is one of the best ways that I can stay on my path if I choose to stay reverent to the messaging that I get from my gut. So Bob had sent me a message and had communicated multiple times that I communicate in a weird way. And I don't know if I had asked for additional clarification on that, but Bob offered up that he said, you walk like, or you talk like you're walking through a landmine. And I was like, So I let that land and I chewed on it. And I was like, there's probably truth in that. Like, let me sit with the discomfort because, immediately my knee-jerk reaction is like, I want to fight that. Like, no, I don't. I'm not walking through no fucking landmine. But I was like, you know what? Maybe I am. So I sat with that and I thought to myself, what's the landmine? What are the landmines that I'm walking through right now? And so another person's name came to mind that I'm not going to say on this podcast, but another person's name came to mind, and Spirit was like, ask him if he remembers this person, because we all went to school together at one point. Relevant to mention that I was in a relationship, and it wasn't a situationship. I was in a relationship with this person, and I was confused at first. I was like, I don't really understand. And I was like, all right, but a lot of landmines live there, so let me be vulnerable and let me ask. And so I said, hey, Bob, do you remember so and so? And he said, yeah, absolutely. He's dead. We were friends until, he died. And I was like, yeah, no, I know that he's dead. And I believe I sent I don't believe I did send a voice message because sometimes words don't land the way they're intended to land. And so I took a deep breath And I was like, okay, we're gonna go in. We're gonna be vulnerable and we're gonna go in. So I took a deep breath and I said, yeah, I know that that person's dead. Because I was the one who had to find him. And our relationship was very complicated. Excuse me, very complicated. Um, I clarified that when I say relationship, I mean that we were planning things together, we were building a life, we were having sex, we were just doing all the things, and that house of cards came crumbling down. Um, and then for a good portion of that relationship, it was pretty dysfunctional. And in later episodes of this podcast, I'll be talking about that a little bit more. But this was an act of vulnerability toward Bob. And I said, so, Bob, if you're perceiving landmines, they probably exist. And they probably exist on this particular playing field because that relationship from which I have done a lot of healing was really impactful in my life. This could have been my exit stage left instruction from jump. Let me just throw that out there. The response that I got from Bob on that message was, why are you telling me that you used to fuck so and so? Really, sir? This is as much as you took out of that. But again, she persisted. She persisted. Um, True lines, had a lot of barriers, or yeah, barriers. I'm not gonna lie. I had a lot of barriers up. I had a lot of boundaries up. When I see in my head this like porcupine, like my, the not claws, what are they called? But like the little like little porky things on a porcupine. Anyway, whatever they're fucking called, they were up a little bit. But I thought, okay, let me just accept that that's what I received in return. Let's keep moving forward. And there's not to say that there wasn't a lot of fun conversations. It was really dope actually to talk to Bob. We would laugh, we would, what have you. Um, and the truth is that I felt throughout this very short social experiment that how I was, how I lived, the things I believed in were continually mocked or questioned or, what have you. So we agreed finally to go to dinner. And I had said a couple of times, we were just going to be friends. We're just going to be friends. Um, I should have stayed in that lane. Uh, but I didn't. I took a very short trip out of that lane. And during dinner, you know, we kissed a lot. We made out. And then out in the car, we kissed and made out and was invited to go back to Bob's house. I did not accept that invitation. Spirit was very, there was a part of me that was like, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Like, go get dick down for a couple hours and go home. And Spirit, it went from a whisper to a directive, and Spirit was like, no. And I said, okay, back off, like, fine. So I didn't. And that's where like and the fact that I didn't is a good thing. It's an integrous thing. The fact that I didn't stand in my no when I knew that this as a relationship was not aligned with me, that's where I really fucked up. Um, and so Bob got food poisoning after dinner, after the restaurant. Uh, we talked a couple of times after that. Another attempt at vulnerability was just trying to express that he had asked me how I'd slept, and I said not well, and I said I'm going through a lot of emotional stuff with one of my kids, really hard. that was met with, "I want to kiss you." And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not actually in that space to receive that. Well, I don't understand it. I want to kiss you. And he said, and then I got a little prickly, got probably more than a little prickly. And I said that, if my attempts at being vulnerable with you are going to be met with like talking about your physical desires, like we're completely in two different avenues of the world. And that was met with, I don't understand. We all have problems. And so yeah, that's where my opportunity to be really clear came. And instead, I wasn't, I didn't step into that clarity, because that was my no. Like that was when, for me, I was like, oh, this is a all the way no. And I pushed back and I said a few things. It's like, if this is the depth that you're going to show me, then just fucking, like, I'm all set. Goodbye. What I didn't say is, I do not wish to move forward with this anymore. Instead, I let myself believe that the words that I did say and the prickliness and the sharpness that I demonstrated, I guess would be the best way to put it, was enough for that person to know, like, okay, you're in the friend zone now, squarely in the friend zone. So we were talking yesterday, maybe. I think it was yesterday. And Bob made mention that, oh, like, you should make time to kiss me again. And I said very matter of factly, it was just very matter of factly that, well, I think we both know that we're in the friend zone, so we won't be doing that. And yeah, it was just this very stoic, sharp-ish, but definitely dry. Um, you and I both know we're in the friend zone. And it didn't land well. Um, there's a lot of hurt feelings there. And there was a lot of back and forth of, what you did or said, what I did or said, like that whole back and forth, that narrative that I don't want to be there. And so I've had to sit with that. I've had to sit with that. And I reached out to Bob, or, during the conversation, I reflected that, you're right. I was not clear, and that's on me, and I'm sorry. Um, and that, making out with you is confusing and doesn't it doesn't represent me being in my integrity, and I'm sorry. Um, and that was met with a lot of hurt, with a lot of, like, I hot shrapnel, just hot shrapnel in my face. And so two things can be true. So here's where I pivot. One, I can feel really bad for my part. I can reflect and look back and say, ooh, that wasn't okay. It wasn't okay to recognize that this really doesn't have legs to morph into anything, but let's just take the fun parts of it and drag it along. It's not cool. And I own that. Like, I can feel it in my heart. And I'm like, um, the other truth is that I do not have to stand in the path of hot shrapnel just because that person doesn't have the emotional intelligence or the experience of communicating in a way that's rooted in compassion, um, because I was a bad girl, right? Like, oh, you're a bad girl. So therefore, you just have to take my shit in the way that I'm going to give it to you, no matter what. And that's not true. So I blocked Bob. And then today, on one of my social media platforms, Bob sent me a message. Oh, you blocked me and you're this and you're that and you're shallow and you're halfway and you're all the things. And my response to him was it was just from not a triggered place at all. It was very much like this. You can cast me in any role that you want to in your life. I didn't say this next part, but what that means is if you want to make me a villain, make me the villain. It's fine. I don't, he said, I must have been really bad or done something really wrong. And my response to Bob was, you didn't do anything wrong. We are not aligned, and I'm back in my lane. And that's where the fuck I'm going to be. And I don't have to stand and again take facefuls of hot shrapnel about, you know, who I am or what I'm about or anything like that. I know who the fuck I am and I know what I'm about. And no matter how many times during this short period of time I was told, I know who you are, and I was like, and you don't though, right? Um, I do know who I am. And so, ladies, gentlemen, all of us, I guess what I want to encourage you to do from sharing this is there's a lot of there's a lot of growth in owning that you had a part in something. And that part doesn't have to be a line of fault. You know, I don't believe this is his fault, and I don't believe this is my fault per se. I think it is a culmination of unskillful choices and something not having. There was a comment that he made early on, after the dick pic, um, that something about like with our history, because we knew each other back when, and to me, how that landed was like, what are you and I said, that's like, what are you talking about? Our history? Like our history? What does that even fucking mean? Right? And so sometimes I know, and I've fallen into this before where I've known somebody in another lifetime and another within this lifetime. I'm not talking like literal other lifetimes, but I've known somebody in another lifetime from when I was a teenager, from when I was a kid, from fucking 10 years ago, even, who is holding on to that version of me, or I'm holding on to that version of them. And I'm selling myself the idea that, oh, but I know you. I know you. I've known you for, 30 years. No, you haven't. You knew me in grade school, high school. And then there was a gang of motherfucking time that, holy God, please, for the love of Jesus, say that I've changed. Please. I want to have changed from that point to now, but that doesn't mean that we know each other. And I think willingness to get to know one another is important. Um, and for me, that takes conversation and that takes words. And, I like the foundation to be built before like I'm fucking somebody on the ground of that foundation because that's easy. Like I can fuck you on the ground of the foundation, but it doesn't equate to anything that's lasting for me. And again, that's one of the places where I fucked up, right? Like I didn't stand in my knowing and I didn't stand in my grace, going and getting caught up in the fun of something for me just didn't feel good. And I've learned from it. Also, what I've learned is, different ways that I have guarded myself or protected myself. And this is unpacking even a little further for me, as we speak, because it's something that actually just before I got to the office to record this podcast, this blossomed open for me. And so I haven't talked about this person with very many people in my life, a couple, maybe a handful, 4, maybe 5 women in particular, um, that, I would say, this is what's going on, and I would, you know, try to seek some guidance or whatever. But what I realized, oh, and this is like smack me in the face, is that not that I'm going to give you this person's actual name. And I didn't have to give them his actual name, but instead I referred to him as Mr. Dick Pic. That's more than a little bit fucked up. It's more than a little bit fucked up because he is not that. That was an unskillful choice that he made, in my opinion. He'll stand behind it. Although he did apologize and shift his behavior, so I do appreciate that about him. Um, Referring to him in that way, as I started unpacking it, and it's going to unpack even more, I'm sure, because I'm going to dig into it. But one of the things that was really clear to me up front was, oh, I wasn't calling him by his name because that embodies him, like, right? Like, not that we are our names, but that gives him more weight, so to speak, more energetic weight. But if I, uh, what is it? Characterize? No. What is it when they make the big cartoons? Doesn't matter. But if I call him Mr. Dick Pic, then it kind of dehumanizes him. So therefore that creates a barrier, boundary between he as a person and me as a person. And I'm recognizing that. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I was really caricature. That's the word. I was making a caricature of him, to people from whom I was seeking guidance, which is at most like a spit's worth of vulnerability. And so I recognize that, and I'm owning that, and I'm letting that integrate into my knowing and into my being. And I stand behind the block because I'm at a place in my life, and you'll get to know me a little bit more as I continue to record these podcasts. But I'm at a place in my life where I don't want to have a connection that is built on trying to convince the other person of my perspective or vice versa, right? I don't want anyone to feel like they have to fight for their perspective to be honored, listened to. But how we say what we say, I think is really important. And how we show up, I think, is really important. But I'm not in a place in my life where I used to be in this place where I thought, oh, like, oh, if it's love, it's worth fighting for. I'm not fighting. I'm not fighting. I will live the rest of my days with my cat and my dog and my fucking gorgeous, beautiful humans that I have in my life, and my vibrator, frankly, quite happily, before I will put myself into a position from jump where there's this like continued like friction of like, your ideas are bullshit, and no, they're not, because because they're definitely not. No, I Googled them. They really are. Like, everything that you believe in is horseshit. And I am literally not doing that. What I know about myself is that I have a really big bandwidth of being able to sit in somebody else's, we'll say, disbelief of how I live my life, or just confusion on how I live my life, or just thinking that my woo woo shit is just woo woo shit. Like, it's fine. Like, you can believe that all day long, 100%. What I don't want to do is I don't want to have to go back and forth in this continual banter, and then be told that, oh, you're not being vulnerable. Yeah, yeah, I am. I am literally handing you a roadmap to me. And if you want to get to me, follow the roadmap. And I'm asking for a roadmap to you. How do I engage with you? And there was never that connection. We continued to miss the mark. And that's okay, totally okay. Um, the opportunity that I have is I have the opportunity to grow, and I have the opportunity to recognize different things, like making somebody a caricature, um, based on an unskillful choice or any situation, um, is a protective mechanism to keep them a little bit further away from you than you want them. And yeah, I got to sit with that further, but I recognize that. Um, Not standing in one's no. Yeah, that's also super not cool. Um, unless that no changed, right? Like you get to change your fucking no, you get to change your mind. Yeah, but part of this, the intention of this podcast is for me to say those things and like share those aha moments of like, oh fuck, like I really fucked up on this. And I delivered the amends or the apology that I felt was owed. And now, what I have the opportunity to do, in this person's absence, because I don't have a burning desire to dive back into that pool of like friction back and forth, is I have the opportunity to grow from it. Um, yeah, I have the opportunity to grow from it. And that's what I want to do. And so this feels like a really organic place to start this podcast. Um, and it's not to say that I don't want to talk about the other things that I have on my extensive list of like, trying to make sense of what's going on in my head. Because if I don't, um, it will get off the rails really fucking quick. But this feels organic to me because some of the things that we'll talk about that have happened in different lifetimes of mine, different iterations of me, have brought me to this place where I don't have to vilify the person. I don't think Bob is a villain at all. Um, some of the ways in which I fucking prickly poked his face, um, don't necessarily make me a villain either. I stand in the messaging that I gave. And I recognize that I could have done that in a different way. And yeah, and because I am at this point in my life, open to but not seeking partnership, this is a really, really juicy lesson for me to learn. And so yeah, it feels organic that I'm sharing this now, um, in the way that I'm sharing it. So life is messy, healing is messy. You know what else is messy? I can't tell how long I've been recording. So like I don't know if this episode is 20 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, if it's 7 minutes, I fucking no idea. Um, and the Capricorn in me is like, yeah, but Kendra, why don't you have a timer going right now? Because I don't. Because if I script everything in life, then I can't experience anything. Well, I can't experience life in the way I want to. Um, One of the things that Bob did say, as a criticism to me, was that you say that you seek to understand, but you didn't try to understand me even for 1 second. And that is not true. I definitely tried to understand. And it's likely an opportunity to deepen my skills and hone my skills of how I say what I say and, asking mindful questions. And if somebody wants to step into that, answering those questions, just because you ask a question doesn't mean that it has to be answered. But yeah, it will give me the opportunity to look at that and say, all right, how can I make my bandwidth even more expansive in these cases? Which I just need to clarify something for anyone who is like me, a healing people pleaser. Just because you have the bandwidth for something, just because you can hold space potentially for hot shrapnel being thrown in your face, does not mean you are obligated to do that at the time that a person wants you to do that or ever. Okay. So just because you have the bandwidth to hold that space does not obligate you to hold that space. You have the right to your boundaries. I have the right to my boundaries. And with the right to your boundaries, with the right to my boundaries, comes the obligation to, I think, the responsibility to examine where your boundaries were walls and not just boundaries, and where I had a juicy fucking thought that just like flew right out of my head. And where you didn't align yourself with what you say your values are. So in this case, I had boundaries and I definitely had some walls, and I get to disintegrate the things that are walls that I don't want to be walls. So yay. I had the opportunity to look at my behavior and say, oh, that is fucking confusing. And I say I want clarity because I do. And I say that I provide clarity. And I think I do very well most of the time in providing clarity. And in this case, that shit the bed. I was not clear. I was like, I don't make out with my friends, but I'm going to make out with you. I'm just not going to fuck you. Um, yeah, I wasn't clear, and I didn't stand in the grace of that clarity. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit and punish myself over it. I'm gonna mental note, ooh, opportunity to shift, opportunity to grow, and I'm gonna do that. So again, without knowing at all where I am in the number of minutes in this podcast, I'm gonna call it a wrap here. I love you so much. And to Bob, if you ever watch this, like I said in my message to you, me having this boundary and me implementing the block because I'm not going to sit in shrapnel doesn't mean that I don't think you're an amazing human being. It just means that, yeah, you're where you're at, I'm where I'm at. And there's a really, really long playing field that would need to bridge. Um, and I can love you from all the way back here, and I can send you good vibes because I don't think you're a villain. Just so you know, I just yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't think you're a villain, Bob. Overall, I think you're a pretty fucking dope human being. And if that's confusing to you, where I can think you're a dope human being, but also have blocked you, just know that where I've gotten to in my life, and this is for everyone, where I've gotten into in my life has come from experiences, has come from healing, and that shit cannot be Googled. It's got to be lived. Anyway, I'm Kendra. I love you so much. I hope that I will see you again. Bye.